there. It's been a pretty great day. I had a SQL challenge this morning where we tuned a really fun query. But today we are recording a podcast episode for Dear SQL DBA in this half hour, and we are talking about dealing with lack of control as a database administrator. My name is Kendra Little, and I'm from SQLworkbooks.com. And before I get started, I got just a tiny bit of marketing for SQL Workbooks. I have a bunch of live SQL seminars coming up. Really excited about doing these. And these are the kinds of things that in the past I've done as full day or half day training sessions. These are all live and online. The Learn Indexing and Solving Problems seminar, there are 2 dates for that. And I'm really excited. I'm doing this on 2 different days. It's going to be 2 4-hour sessions. So you can still keep your inbox from overflowing. It's all from on GoToWebinar. So I'm doing 1 set of sessions in June and 1 set of sessions in September for that. And I've got a coupon for you. It expires in just 36 hours. It is May 17th at 1 p.m. Pacific right now. So you got to do this before the end of the week. The coupon code is I love indexes, and you get $400 off the Learn Indexing by Solving Problems webinar. You can choose either session if you want to take advantage of that. So that is the end of the marketing portion of the webcast. Moving on to our topic today, which is dealing with a lack of control as a database administrator. And I decided to kind of embrace my inner DBA who wants to chill out. And I normally do like kind of formal PowerPoints for this. Not really. I mean, I don't know. Are they formal if they have cartoons in them? But today I was like, I think I'm going to map this out in a set of notes and talk through it. And I'm going to publish the set of notes too. And just talk about how I've experienced this as a database administrator. There were, have been, it's not like this is all in the past. There's been many, many times where I've landed in what would be a funny Dilbert situation if it wasn't all too real, where I was really accountable for something that I couldn't prevent something bad from happening to it, or I couldn't fix the issue. One story, I tell this in a specific presentation about blocking a lot, but there was one time where my team kept getting severity 1 bugs for this issue that would basically take down our main OLTP instance. It wouldn't take it down in the sense of the instance would still remain active, but to a user, it seemed like it was unavailable because basically the issue was this massive blocking chain that happened. The server instance was powerful enough that it kept running. Like the performance from these blocked queries wasn't so bad that people couldn't access the instance, but users would just see their screens completely freeze up when this happened. And we'd have to go in, and the query that was holding the lock was just sleeping. Like it would open a transaction, do some stuff, and then just go to sleep. And it should have been a very short operation. The short-term fix was to kill the blocking query. And the problem in this situation was the team that owned the code for the misbehaving query, they said, oh, well, this isn't our problem at all. This is not our responsibility. This is the DBA's responsibility to fix this performance. We haven't changed this code in a while. We've been working in completely other parts of our application. This isn't us. But and every time this ticket got open and we looped him in on it, the leader of their team specifically, would lower the severity of the ticket. So we would fix the issue, and then they would lower the severity ticket, and they would always say, we can't help. And so we were sort of left holding the ball on this because we always had to be involved, because we either had to automate something to kill this, which in this environment, automating the killing of sessions was not a welcome change at all, because it's a very sensitive environment. Performance and data validity mattered a lot. So it kept getting thrown back at us, and we were left holding the ball. The And the problem ended up getting resolved by actually a third team. There was possibly irreparable damage done to the relationship between the DBA team and the software team because both sides just got really, really frustrated. In the end, a completely separate developer figured out that there was a bug in the .NET framework, and the issue actually was happening on the application servers due to changes that had happened in the .NET framework that had been deployed shortly before the bug started happening. But even after we got the issue fixed, those two teams never worked well together again because the frustration of both teams feeling like I'm being held responsible for something that has nothing to do with me that I can't control, that frustration blew up so much that just everything fell apart. There's been plenty of times where I needed to be responsible for something that just wasn't quite in the scope of my control. There was a position I had, which was a great position, but at the time, the position required signing off on a document every year that contained basically your goals for the year and things that you said you were responsible for. And some of these goals, you didn't get to craft. The way things were done at the time is you didn't get to come up with all your goals yourself. Some of these were inherited from the group, and we were forced to effectively promise to keep to a service level agreement. There were service level agreements with our customers that things would happen in a certain way. So we were having to promise to keep incidents within the limits by these service agreements, but the work itself in controlling incidents was much larger than my particular team. The actual servicing of incidents was done by outsourced groups of people who were thousands of miles away, who had their own management, who I hadn't met. But I had to commit to keep these service level agreements, even though none of these folks reported to me, and I couldn't directly control them. I could indirectly influence some of the things that happened, but further, the contracts for the outsourcing, the actual way the contracts were worded and what they got rewarded for, what the folks closing the tickets got rewarded for was just simply closing tickets. But the service level agreements weren't only about closing tickets. The contract actually didn't specify that the customers had to be happy, unfortunately. So while that contract was in place, it was very, very difficult to accept this. And it was very difficult to sign that document and be like, yes, I promise that I will keep these service level agreements in place, which I absolutely can't control. And that was an interesting one. That one was very tough for me mentally, just because I take contracts very, very seriously. It was very, very tough for me to actually sign the document because this is a promise that's hard for me to make. The true functioning of that document was largely a formality. The truth was, in theory, I'm being judged on whether I can keep to these promises I made, but the actuality of the situation, how it actually functioned within the corporate life, this wasn't a contract that if we didn't meet these rules, we would be docked a certain amount of pay or anything like that. This was part of a employee ranking system, really. And there was almost a tradition of having these things in the document. And I really had to make the decision, how big a deal is this for me? Because if I don't agree to sign off on this, then I may have to actually leave this group, because not participating in the review process is a really big deal, right? So and I talked to my manager a lot about this. And I was like, this makes me really uncomfortable, and here are the reasons why. And we kind of came to an agreement. He's like, and I said, it would just make me feel a lot better if we documented, not in the review document itself, if we created a separate document where we kind of just acknowledge the current situation in terms that don't blame anyone, but acknowledge what's really going on here and the limitations, just so I feel like I'm not hiding it. right? And we came to an agreement where I felt like I was being clear with the company, where I felt like people knew what was going on, and I did sign it out of a formality. But it isn't something that made me happy. There's also a time when we had a mandate for a large IT group that I was in, where we had to come up with key performance indicators. We had to be able to monitor the performance of our applications and be able to very simply show whether performance was green, orange, or red. There are three forms that performance can be in. Things can be green, they can be orange, or they can be red. And my task was to come up with very quickly, using performance counters, using a simple tool that was collected by an existing monitoring system. My task was to engineer key performance indicators for our application so that at a glance, it could be seen whether the application was green or orange or red. And then later we would come up with agreements about how long an application could be green or orange or red. And doing this for SQL Server with only performance counters in a short amount of time is incredibly difficult. Especially given a limited amount of performance counters. This was a task that I was like, I am excited about attempting this. But the level of accuracy is going to be very low. I mean, I knew that from the start. I did take on this project with great excitement. And I did come up with a result, but with my results, I had to include a lot of notes about situations this doesn't cover. Because I frankly asked my manager and his manager whether they wanted the results to err on the side of green or to err on the side of red, because they were going to err one way or the other. And I said, which slant would you like? I will include some documentation about the way that this slants in there. And, that will happen. But for the 1.0, we really can't do a lot there. So, I mean, these were just three of the stories that came to mind when I thought about just the frustrating times when I was responsible for something that I couldn't control, when I wanted to be able to control a situation, and it was part of my job performance, but I just really didn't have the tools. I only had either very indirect control or I didn't have control at all. And things that didn't work for me there are some things that didn't work for me, and I've seen them not working for other people as well. In that situation where the ticket just kept coming back for us repeatedly saying, hey, this just isn't our responsibility, it did not work at all. It did not work at all. When you're in a situation and people keep pushing something back to you, like they will not accept that there's a responsibility, it just keeps coming back to your doorstep, just pretending like it doesn't keep landing on your doorstep. It's right there on your doorstep. Other people think it belongs to you. That kind of makes it your problem. So that pattern of saying, no, this isn't my problem, it's very similar to just saying no to a repeated request over and over again. It typically doesn't make the request go away. It may make the request get escalated and come from someone more important, but just saying it that bluntly and that directly doesn't help when working with this problem of I only have indirect influence over something that matters to my career, even if I don't want it to matter to my job. Things that have worked for me. The biggest issue I think I've had with this is that I tend to take the situation pretty personally. The frustration I felt at hearing, no, this isn't our issue, severity lowered, no, we won't help with this. We will not, help you out with this from that other team. That frustration was like really deep. And it just really felt just stressful to be like, oh no, this is your problem, when this is something that, I can't prevent from happening at all. I can only do this short-term fix for it. And similarly, being held accountable for the quality of service when you can only indirectly control the people who are providing the service, right? I can write the documentation for them, but I can't make everybody follow it. I can only indirectly influence that. That was also very stressful, that the quality of my work was, or the quality of my job performance wasn't only based on the quality of my work. And I wasn't really equipped well to collaborate with the people who were actually providing the work. Taking a step back, and this is something that over time I got much better at, taking a step back and trying to depersonalize the situation really often helped me figure out how to create a strategy that wasn't just, this is stupid, it should stop, but a strategy that was more likely to work. Doing techniques like actually focusing on other things, like putting work down and exercising, doing something immersive to get me to stop thinking about the issue. Trying to mentally role play and imagine, okay, what if I had a friend who was in this situation and they described it to me? What advice would I give to them? Taking the issue away from the thing about my performance being judged, trying to decenter it from that would generally put me in a position where I could come up with a more thoughtful strategy. And strategies that helped were things like, okay, thinking outside of my current role, like, there's clearly a problem going on. If I was not me, if I was not in my role as database administrator, if I was the CTO of the company, what would I want to see happen? I probably wouldn't want to see this one person have to work 60-hour weeks and get burnout and quit their job, right? That's not a viable solution, right? The CTO probably wouldn't want individual workers to really suffer because they want a healthy workforce that lasts for a while. Especially if you're a full-time employee. I can't promise they actually always want that, but most of the time they don't want you to get burnt out and quit, really. At least the ones I've talked to. So think about it from their position. What would they want to happen? Would they want you to reach out to a third team and say, look, we've got this problem and we just aren't figuring it out? In that situation where that other team and I kept going back and forth with that bug and both of our teams were like, no, it's you, no, it's you, no, it's you. Everything probably would have turned out a lot better if earlier on in the process, I had thought to be like, oh, you know what? Maybe, I've got some friends on the other dev teams. Maybe I should go talk to them, and not in a gossipy way, but just be like, we have this really interesting problem that none of us can solve. Like, present it as like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if someone smart figured this out? Or someone in that environment where people love to be the smart person figuring something out, someone would have risen to the challenge rather than us waiting for it to happen by accident, right? So what would the CTO want? Would they want for you to bring in another team to help? Maybe that team you bring in is inside the organization. Maybe it's consultants outside the organization. CTOs are often open to, hey, we've got this really tough problem and we've been banging our heads against it. We would like to get another set of eyes on this. And oftentimes they will pay for bringing a consultant. And by the way, I'm not selling my services. I do not offer consulting services at this point in time. I may someday in the future, but I have been brought in by many people in the past who've said, hey, we've got this tough problem we can't figure out. We want someone short term to get another set of eyes on it and help us solve it. And that can be a reasonable expense. So thinking about that can help lead you to figuring out, can we pull in another team internally? Who are the people who could help us with this? Do we need someone outside? Documenting and outlining and saying what you can do for the person can also help. And this is the approach that I often took in that situation where we would have service tickets done and they wouldn't always be done to the customer satisfaction, but I am also responsible for customer satisfaction. So we've got an outsourced workforce that turns over a lot, right? There's not always great work being done, in part because it's always someone's first day. The way that things worked, there was always, they're trying to interpret the documentation, but they don't really know what to do. So unhappy customers would get escalated up to me. I was a higher level of support at that time. And I would have a frustrated person and they would ask me, how are you going to fix this service so that this issue doesn't happen again to another person? And I actually didn't have a way that I could offer them to fix everything. I couldn't rewrite the contract. I couldn't make it so that it wasn't someone's first day that they were trying to help this person. That did get fixed longer term, by the way. It just couldn't happen right away, but that did get fixed longer term. But what I could do is I could say, here is what I can do for you. Here is changes I'm going to make in our documentation to try to help prevent this from happening again. Right? I can't guarantee it's not going to happen again. But I would say, here is what I can do. And I would outline what I could do. And I would follow up after I completed the steps and say that I did them. Sometimes the thing that you're saying about here is what I can do is actually not doing much of anything at all. Sometimes you're saying, here's what I can do. I can put you in touch with the person who can help you. Essentially what you're saying is, here's what I can do. I can punt you to someone else, but putting it and phrasing it that way, instead of saying, no, I can't help you, saying, here is what I can do and outlining what you can actually do. Sometimes simply that helps the customer base. A lot of times they can read between the lines and kind of see what you can't do or what you won't do from that. So you got to be a little careful. You don't want to be sarcastic about it, but outlining and documenting, here's what I can do, and trying to be a little gracious about the limitations, right? I'm not saying limitations like I can't do more because the contract's real stupid. That's not everybody needs to know that information, but just talking about what I can do and asking for help sometimes. Sometimes if I want a third party to be brought in, they have a problem. So we have an example question here. What if I'm being asked to performance tune when the issue is design, but there's no support for redesign, or it was designed against your recommendations, right? So, and maybe I'm even responsible for the performance, even though I didn't cause the problem. So that might be a situation where if there are complaints about the performance, when people come to me and are like, we need you to do this performance tuning. Now, what I do in this situation might kind of depend on what my goals are. If I want my job to be performance tuning, like if I actually want to move more into that, even though it's not my actual job, I might look around for different ways that I could strategize to get some time on that project. You know what I mean? But if and this is being lined up as, no, I don't want to do break fix performance tuning. That's more the way the question is being asked. I don't want to do break fix performance tuning. I want to actually properly have time to do a redesign on this. Then one of the ways I could approach that, it can, depending on how much you have in terms of time to invest in the severity of it, it may be useful to gather some information about the problem. How critical is it to the customer? Does it look like there's a simple way to fix it? Like, at least doing enough legwork to figure that out is worth it. You don't want to invest a huge amount of time, but you can use this kind of situation to say, look, here's the kind of thing it is. This one, I haven't identified a quick fix for it. I do think that if we had time to do some of these deeper strategic changes, we could do it. It's not, and this is kind of the development term, right? That, folks say, oh, it's on the backlog, right? That one's been around in software development for years. Oh, we would love to do this, but it's on the backlog. So the question is, how do I get this off the backlog instead of doing all these incremental fixes to it? In the past, when this has happened with me, I've developed a system to earmark all the different little requests over time, right? And so maybe it's ticket numbers, depending on what you're using with these requests. Maybe it's cases of email. And once I have enough of them, or I have one of them with enough severity, I can make a case for the redesign. Oh, look, over the past 6 months, we've had 17 different performance incidents, and there haven't been quick resolutions to this many of them. Look how much time we're spending even just fielding these and saying no, or there've been this many we had to turn away, or it took this much time. How can we keep these from continuing to happen? Because if we don't get down to the redesign, they're going to continue to happen. So, what I can do for you sometimes is simply maybe I don't even have time to diagnose it. I would love to be able to diagnose this for you, but unfortunately we don't have time. I'm going to keep track of this incident and see if we can have time later, right? That's something I can do for you without being able to fix it. But phrasing it in that way and kind of gathering up the evidence, because in this case, if you were the CTO of the company, you would you would probably want to have that redesign happen if this was impacting people enough, right? You'd want somebody to kind of gather the trail of crumbs and put them together and say, no, this is worth it. This is justified for the time. And if it's work that you want to do, then even better, because now you've kind of made a case to say, hey, I want to actually have the time to do this, so we need to find someone else to do all this other stuff I'm doing. Sketching out, and this is part of the final thing I have, is sketching out an approach to narrow the gap. So, sometimes when we're just saying, here is what I can do for you, we know that what we can do is very limited because it's just not part of our job. Maybe we want it to be, maybe we don't, it doesn't matter, but we have limits and that sometimes things just can't happen. So sometimes if there's a case where you're like, okay, here's what I can do for you, but I know it's not going to be satisfying, I will take the time to say, okay, what is it, just big picture, just writing on a napkin? What do I think is the kind of thing that could solve it? I may not be right, but off the top of my head, what kind of project do I think this would be? Would we need to call in from someone from outside? Would we need to form a V team? That's an old reference to corporate speak, the form a virtual team across different teams. Would we need to, I love corporate speak, I'm sorry. So I heard this one recently, develop some thoughtware, but try and maybe not use the ridiculous jargon. I apologize for going there, but actually sketch out, okay, here's what I can do for you. And there's a lot that's left undone, but how should they try to make this happen? And maybe there's a part that you can help with that in them, and maybe there's not, but you're just sort of sketching out. And sometimes the people who keep throwing it back to you are just going to say, well, that's great, I need you to do that. You know what I mean? And you have to go back and say, I really wish I could, but this just isn't something I can do. These are the steps I think we would need to make this happen, right? But sometimes sketching that out can be helpful. And really, if it's for the good of the business, it's for the good of the business for it to happen. Just sketching out that plan to narrow the gap, it can sometimes keep you involved in the project. That is the one little warning with that part of the approach is sometimes you stay in there. But my opinion on these things has always been, hey, I work for this company and what we're trying to do is make things work the best they can. So even if it's not strictly my job, I can't spend a ton of time on it, but I can at least try to help somebody else get what they need to get where they want to go. Now, there are some exceptions to all of this. If there are things you're responsible for that are out of your control and they lead you to believe that there is going to be data loss, major security risks, or even just, and this isn't a just, or additionally, if they lead you to believe that there is something ethically wrong, then that's a case to raise a flag. That is not a case to use one of these techniques of depersonalizing it or thinking outside of your current role. Do think outside of your current role, but think outside the role as the CTO and there's a major data loss, right? This is no good. You would want, if there is risks of data loss, major security breach, anything that would make the CTO of your company majorly squirm and have a really bad day, bad week, bad month, those are things where you don't want to just sign off on the form. You want to really raise the flag. And if you're in a position where your current manager, you raise the flag and your current manager says, oh, it's no big deal, then you are left in a very tough position, because just your manager saying it's no big deal doesn't keep you off the front page of the internet if something goes really, really wrong. But more than that, it's still your responsibility, right? You can't control your manager directly. You can indirectly control them, but you're left in a position. And I have gotten emails like this from folks of, there's a really big deal at my work, and I think this is a really big problem, and my direct manager says I have to ignore it, but something really bad is happening, either in terms of risk or in terms of ethics violation. And in that case, you have to do the right thing. That's what I believe, is you have to say, okay, this may be a risk to my career. I may need to also make sure my resume is up to date and start connecting with my network and looking for other things, but I need to go above my I believe I'm making the decision to go outside of my direct management chain and raise this issue to other people because I believe, there is something important I'm responsible for, and it is just not going to happen, and it is a major risk to the company. So I'm going to go higher up to more business owners. And if nobody cares, well, maybe I don't really want to be working there. Because as a database person, as someone who works with data and is responsible for data, if the company is making promises to their customers that they just can't keep, right? If I feel like there's something really wrong going on there, that isn't a good place to be when you are at the level of being responsible for that data. You are the one who is not guaranteeing something that should be guaranteed, for instance. So it is tough. With great responsibility comes sometimes really great challenges in terms of dealing with keeping our customers happy and satisfied, and also making the data safe and available. It is really tough, but these are the things that I've found to help me over the years. So just checking in on some comments. Got a comment that says, we have a fire team with members of various departments within IT. We can bounce ideas and issues off others. I love that. I have become a big fan of and it is interesting that it's called the fire team, because it's like, yeah, that is very much what you're like, oh yes, we respond to smoke. We follow the smoke. There was a story on Twitter yesterday of someone who, whose boss was like, I gotta go, I'm out for the day, let me know if something's on fire. And then like they had to call them because there was literally a fire. But usually it's a metaphor. That is something that also can be suggested when you start, if you start having kind of recurring things about this, keep bringing up, hey, I've heard that other folks have a fire team where they have, or you can come up with a different name for it. I think software development companies sometimes have different names for it too, but we can come up with a triage team from different groups who they could save us time, because we can try to figure out who the best person to solve this problem is. So just suggesting that, over time, this could be implemented, and it could have been your idea if it doesn't exist at your workplace too. When I first started out in IT, I didn't understand the ability I had to suggest things, just because, the first time you suggest something, it doesn't always come to pass. But over time, I did see that a lot of the ideas that got implemented in our change management process, as well as different teams, were coming from members of those teams who would just suggest something, and then when it, they would bring it up again, and they would bring it up again, and eventually the idea would kind of catch fire and spread, and it would happen. Not every environment, some environments are more rigid than others, but you can indirectly influence a lot. All right, folks, so I've made it through the questions and comments, and this was supposed to be just a half hour. I've gone over a little bit. Sorry about that. But it was real fun to talk with folks today and talk about being responsible for things that we can't control and dealing with that lack of control. If you have later thoughts, I'm going to publish this as a blog post as well as a podcast episode. You can put thoughts, stories, comments on the blog post at SQLworkbooks.com. Thanks a lot, folks, and have a great day. And I will see you again next time. Next time, we will be talking about what will be our topic next time: being outraged on the internet. If you don't tend to be a person who loves to argue about politics on Facebook, if you don't tend to be a person who likes to be angry on the internet, should there be times when you write about something and publicly have a position, whether it be about politics? The one I'm talking about specifically is about being a woman in technology. But what does it mean to kind of go into this political realm when you're not a person who really enjoys that, when you're somebody who just wants to nerd about technical stuff for the most part? What is that like? What does it change, and what are the pros and cons of it? So I'll be talking about that next time. We will be doing that session on May 30th. Thanks, guys, for joining me. I will see y'all next time.